Hi, I'm Eric Francis, and I'm the author of the book Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, a method and model for deeper teaching and learning, published by Solution Tree. Teaching and learning for depth of knowledge has been a focus in education for the past decade, and it continues to be a priority as we enter a new decade. However, if your understanding of depth of knowledge is a little cloudy or unclear, you're not alone. What if I told you that for the past decade, that much of the information that's been presented and provided about depth of knowledge as an academic concept and its framework, the DOK levels, has been inconsistent and even inaccurate? Much of this can be attributed to this visual, the DOK Wheel. The DOK Wheel has been the resource and tool we educators have been using to determine the level of depth of knowledge demanded by academic standards, curricular activities, and test items, even though it's completely inaccurate. You might have heard that depth of knowledge is about what comes after the verb. And that's accurate. You might have also been told or trained that the level of depth of knowledge demanded does not depend upon the type or level of thinking students must demonstrate as indicated by those cognitive action verbs. We have to look beyond the initial cognitive action verb at those words and phrases that describe what exactly and detail how deeply students must understand and use their learning in a certain context. And that's not only accurate, but also consistent in all the conversations about depth of knowledge. So what's the inaccuracy, the inconsistency, or even the issue? If you look closely at the DOK wheel, you'll see that not only is it full of verbs, but also the same verb can be found in multiple spokes of this DOK wheel. And if you ever thought, well, DOK just seems like another way to do Bloom's revised taxonomy, you're absolutely correct, because what if I told you that the DOK wheel was actually derived from the Bloom's Hot Wheel that was first introduced by Dr. Barbara Clark in her book, Growing Up Gifted? So that's how the DOK wheel is both inaccurate and inconsistent with what exactly depth of knowledge is as an academic concept and a framework. It's also an invalid resource and tool for determining the level of depth of knowledge demanded and the cognitive rigor of academic standards, curricular activities, and test items. Why? This is the DOK poster that was provided to us educators as part of our training on college and career readiness standards. We were also told and trained how to use this poster to determine the level of depth of knowledge demanded by academic standards, curricular activities, and test items, even though it's full of verbs. It's also featured on numerous education department websites and distributed in numerous schools. However, look at the citation at the bottom of that page. If you go to that URL address that's cited in the citation, it's going to take you to a dead link. It's also not even the correct link to the web alignment tool that Dr. Webb used to conduct alignment studies between standards and assessment items. Also, if you notice, the citation credits Dr. Norman Webb as the creator of the DOK wheel. Now, Dr. Norman Webb did develop depth of knowledge as a concept and a framework for conducting alignment studies between standards and assessments. However, what if I told you he did not create this DOK wheel, and he also does not endorse it? And neither does Dr. Karen Hess, who superimposed Webb's depth of knowledge levels with Bloom's taxonomy to create her concept of cognitive rigor. In fact, she calls it the DOK wheel of misfortune because it flies in the face of what depth of knowledge is all about. DOK is about what comes after the verb in a learning intention, objective, or target. So now you understand why most of the information we've been presented and provided about depth of knowledge and the DOK levels has been inaccurate and inconsistent, and why the DOK wheel is an invalid resource and tool to determine the level of depth of knowledge demanded by our academic standards, curricular activities, and test items. So where do we go from here with teaching and learning for depth of knowledge, not only as we enter a new decade, but also face an entirely new set of goals and expectations and issues and concerns when it comes to developing our students' strengths and skills? That's why I wrote this book. You see, I believe depth of knowledge can address and also augment teaching and learning in a bunch of different areas and a bunch of different aspects if applied accurately and appropriately. So that's why I split my book, Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, into two parts. The first part focuses on understanding what exactly depth of knowledge is and what distinguishes it from other academic concepts. In this section, you'll learn how the DOK levels function more as a rating scale that designates the different and deeper ways students could understand and use their learning. Then you're going to learn about what distinguishes teaching and learning for depth of knowledge at each DOK level. And you're also going to learn how the delivery and intensity of a DOK teaching and learning experience depends upon the demand of the academic standard being addressed or assessed, and also the strengths of the students collectively as a whole class or grade level and individually to rise to, reach, and go beyond the DOK level of that standard. You'll also see how I transform the DOK levels into a multi-tiered systems of support that can be used to deliver instruction, respond to intervention, extend learning, make modifications for students who receive and require specialized services and supports to achieve and surpass grade level standards, such as exceptional learners and English language learners, and also how to accelerate and enrich grade level teaching and learning experiences for students identified as gifted, talented, and twice exceptional. The second part of the book discusses how to use depth of knowledge and the DOK levels to plan and provide different and deeper teaching and learning experiences. First, you're going to learn how to deconstruct standards to determine their DOK levels. This is the next step in unwrapping and unpacking standards. You're going to learn how to identify the complexity of the content knowledge students must learn and the conditions and criteria in which students must understand and use their learning to determine the level of depth of knowledge demanded by the standard's learning intention. Then you're going to use the DOK descriptors I develop that detail the demand of the task students must complete, the mental processing skills students must perform, or the response students must provide to curricular activities and test items to determine and define the level of depth of knowledge demanded by the academic standard and its learning intention and individual objectives. How you use those DOK descriptors depend upon you. Are you more of a task-oriented person? Then you'll use the DOK task descriptors. Do you focus more on the mental processing and skills students must perform? Then you'll use the DOK skill descriptors. Are you more outcomes-oriented? Then you'll use the DOK response descriptors. I also developed DOK descriptors that students could understand and keeps it simple. For example, DOK 1, just answer it. DOK 2, use it to explain it. DOK 3, use it to prove it, and DOK 4, go for it. From there, you'll learn how to reconstruct your standards learning intention objectives into DOK learning targets that will state the DOK skills students must perform, and you'll also learn how to create DOK success criteria that will specify the DOK response students must provide to curricular activities and test items that address or assess that standard's DOK learning targets. There's also a chapter in there that talks about how to create good questions that will demand students to demonstrate and communicate their depth of knowledge. It's an extension of my book, Now That's a Good Question, which talked about how to rephrase the performance objectives of academic standards and learning targets into good questions. This chapter is all about how to develop and deliver inquiry-based teaching and learning experiences driven by good questions that will demand students to demonstrate and communicate their learning at different DOK levels. I also included in there an update on Let's Make a DOK, a popular blog post I wrote a few years ago that compared the demand of DOK teaching and learning experiences to television shows. So again, the book is called Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, a method and model for deeper teaching and learning. It's by me, Eric Francis. It's published by Solution Tree, and I wrote this book to help everyone finally understand what exactly depth of knowledge is and how those DOK levels can be used accurately and appropriately to develop and deliver teaching and learning experiences that are standards-based, social emotionally supportive, and student responsive. Thank you for watching my video. Thank you for purchasing the book. And thank you for everything you do for students.